Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pop Culture Problems. I'm your co-host, Josh Nichols, and the other co-host, Jay Ozzy. You know, okay, don't judge me. I bring this up for a reason, because if you were going to say my name in kind of that cool, hip, rapster fashion, it would be like Jay Nizzle,
Probably,
right?
yeah.
Because I'm Josh Nichols, so Jay Nizzle. But
that's fair.
Because your last name begins in a vowel, what does that mean? How do you say
Jay
that?
Ozel?
Is it Jay Ozel? That just doesn't try.
I don't know.
Because I think you add it's the consonant with the suffix izzle.
Have you ever given yourself a nickname?
Have I ever given myself?
Yeah.
Nothing I can say on air. I mean, you know.
I didn't originate this one, but when I was in college, there were some guys that had a coffee table that they were carving like names into, and like if you came into their dorm room, you could carve your name into this table, and I carved Otron, and everybody was like, Otron, who's Otron? And I said, I had a teacher in high school who called me Otron one time, so I'm gonna try to bring that back.
Why did they call you Otron?
I don't know. You know,
Otron.
Yeah.
Oh. You know, I actually, and it's kind of funny because I saw one Star Wars movie when I was younger, and Yoda wasn't in it.
Yep.
Yoda was not in it, and I thought Yoda was going to be in it.
You felt cheated.
And I felt cheated, and I didn't watch anymore. And then I saw I don't know how long of it. Let's say a fourth to a half of episode 1. That was the next movie I saw. And I left to go to the bathroom and just never came back. It wasn't at the theater. It was at my own home. I'm like, I'm going to do something else. Or, boy, I think I'll just sit in the bathroom rather than continue to watch
Doki Doki Panic.
And then a friend of mine showed me one more of the Star Wars films. And so that's the only experience I've had with Star Wars. So when I was playing video games with friends, we'd have these big Xbox LAN parties where we'd play Halo and 4 systems, cables running all over the house kind of thing. And I was always a big guy. You know, I was always pretty fat. I mean, blunt.
All right. Okay.
And so one of the friends called me Jabba, like Jabba the Hutt once. He's like, hey there, Jabba. You know, and here's the thing. I try to be nice and not make fun of people. I think, though, for me, if there's something that I can't control, if you say, well, you have an ugly face, well, I guess I could get plastic surgery, but I'm kind of born with it. You're a jerk. Yeah. I could diet, exercise, eat right, eat my daily amount of vitamins, etc., and not be
and
husky.
Be miserable.
Yeah, I could be miserable.
Yeah.
But it's a choice that I make to be a certain, I could exercise. If I had a condition that made me overweight or something, don't make fun of somebody for something they can't control.
Absolutely.
So I didn't mind that he called me Jabba, but that name stuck. My still Gmail address that I made in 2005 includes Jabba in it.
So you own it. You owned it.
I took it and I ran with it.
Yeah.
So, and I remember, we've talked in the past about internet trolls and things like that, and I was actually a little guilty of that because I would go into games and I would just make up a character. I would just make up some sort of a persona, and I would kind of run with it. And so I would make up a nerdy character, and somebody would be like, hey, Jabba, go over and get this item in the game. And I'm like, my name is J-Bay, and you're pronouncing it wrong. And I would make up these little things. So I was kind of an internet troll a little bit with the Jabba name. So if you see a Jabba out there on a video game thing, it's probably me. I'm
not going to vote for that guy, though.
What was that?
I'm not going to vote for that.
You're not going to vote for that?
He's kind of a jerk.
Yeah, here's the thing. If I run a successful enough campaign, doesn't matter what my name is. You're gonna vote for me, because that's what politics are all about. It's a salesman tactic. It's about putting yourself out there and being something better than what you are.
And that brings up an interesting topic that I've wanted to talk to you about. And that is when it comes to entertainment, whether it be video games or movies or TV, whatever form of entertainment you're consuming, how do you feel about politics in your entertainment?
Well, or how do you feel about entertainment in your politics? I mean, these days, sadly, politics have become more of a soap opera than a soap opera is. And so putting that aside, I don't mind shows that are political when that's what they set out to do.
Yes.
So as an example, I love Comedy Central, Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert. Whether you love them or hate them, they're brilliant satirists. I mean, they do a good job, playing those characters in those roles. And those shows, you go into it knowing what they're about. You go in,
you expect that.
Yeah. House of Cards or, shows like that are politically motivated. That's the plot of the show. That's what the show is about. Scandal, those types of things. Like, those shows are about politics. When you're being preachy in a show that's not necessarily about politics, I struggle a bit more with that.
That is something that will ruin something for me. But for example, like the best example that I think I can think of in regards to this was I had a blog back years ago when Glee first came on the air. And I was like one of the most vocal like Glee supporters. And like my blog had like 10 to 50 regular readers.
Oh, yeah.
Like I was pumping Glee hard. Like I was a huge fan.
And their ratings, there was a
skyrocketed
blip in their ratings.
Yes.
It was just for that.
And in the first 2 seasons of Glee, I think the dark humor of the first season, and it kind of leached into the second season a little bit more. Like it really like resonated. Like I thought it was just a really good, smart, funny show. And then the third season, they got into like this afternoon special type thing where it was like the cause of the week, and it just got overtly political. And the thing is like, yeah, you could say that the first 2 seasons were political in that it was about like acceptance and things like that, but it wasn't like so ham-fisted that it was like forcing it down your throat.
Yeah,
there was a nuance to it, and I think they got away from that, and I couldn't watch the show anymore because of that.
But so I'm gonna debate you a little bit here.
Okay.
I think one really political show, one that is very up on current topics that I love, and I think that you love, South Park.
Oh, yeah.
And they do the same thing, but one thing I'll say about them in the defense of you is that they are equal opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the difference.
What do you call it? Equal opportunity making funners?
Offenders. Equal opportunity offenders, yeah.
Not making funners.
Yeah.
That's not the right word.
No, that's not the...
Okay, I'm just making sure that
English is hard. I understand.
I are good at words. It are true. It don't hardly make no never mind. You make me get laugh.
Well, you're from the South.
So they are equal opportunity offenders. But again, they do go into that, kind of topic of the moment. And I don't mind when shows do that, when it becomes so overt or it shifts the focus of the show to being their new mantra of, this is something we should do because they'll get ratings. That's different.
Well, I think it's when you get into like the virtue signaling. And South Park doesn't virtue signal. They will rip both sides of an issue, or all 3 or 4 or 5 sides, however many there are, and they do such a great job of making fun of every side of each issue, and to such a degree that you can't be offended because they hit the other side that disagrees with you just as hard.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the show, like what side people lean on. If you start watching it and they're on that side, like what you're getting into.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
An example I really love, and bear with me for a second. I love the show Will and Grace.
Yeah,
not because of Will and Grace, Sean Hayes and Megan Mullally,
Yes.
as Jack and Karen, that they should really make a Jack and Karen show. But that was a prime example. They recently did a little skit regarding the election, and it was right in the vein with the stuff that they would have done during their show. And they're getting, I think, a 15-episode run this fall.
Yeah.
Revamp, not revamp or revisit. A new season.
Yeah, it's new season.
It's like a Fuller House kind of thing.
Yeah.
A reordering of the show.
Yeah.
You know, they're kind of revitalizing it, and I think that's a prime example because they did in that skit what they had set out to do in the show. I mean, they were covering
it was
the same
still
topics.
Will and Grace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They didn't flip it and say, I think we'll be political today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think that, you talk about like movies and TVs and that, and the really frustrating thing to me lately has been being a comic book fan. It just seems like politics have kind of permeated everything, and when we look to entertainment, I think we're looking for like a certain degree of escapism, and with comic books, for me, that was like a place for me to escape, and the politics, especially like at Marvel right now, it's so ham-fisted, and they're beating you over the head with it to the point where it's just like, let's just get back to telling stories about the Fantastic Four fighting Doctor Doom, or the Avengers fighting Kang, or the X-Men fighting. And the X-Men is a tough one because they've always been kind of, the X-Men have always been a minority. There's always been kind of that element to that where it's you're fighting prejudice and stuff like that. So, but it gets back to what we were talking about. What do you expect when you pick up that book or pick up that movie or turn on the TV? And I think if you go in with the expectation that that's just kind of part of the story, then it's okay. But it's when you kind of co-opt these characters that people love, and maybe somebody on the left saw that this character was somebody that agreed with them, and then all of a sudden a writer or an actor has got them playing the other side of it, and I think you kind of alienate half of your audience when you do that.
Well, okay, so I've got 3 comments.
Yeah.
And again, this is a respectful conversation, and I think that's one thing that we do well. I know that you've said in the past that you just said like, oh, this, you're alienating half of your audience, but also you can't necessarily pigeonhole the character or the actor. I mean, those actors and the writers making those twists, they invoke responses.
Yeah,
so if you disagree, it almost tells you a little bit more about yourself. And again, I can see where if the show takes a 180 turn, where it kind of changes completely. But I go back to South Park. South Park's first seasons were poop jokes and naughty language.
Absolutely.
And they did a really big paradigm shift into being, and again, they do equal opportunity offenders. So, I mean, there is that notion that's very unique about them. But they change, and I think in such a good way. Because, I mean, that pop culture references and
it's so much more topical now.
Yeah, it was very topical. And I think that was a good switch. They were able to keep some of that crudeness with having a goal for it. They were going to run out of ideas pretty quick. There's only so many times you can fart that's going to make it humorous.
Funny,
yeah. And so there's that. Now, here's more of the comic book thing. And that was a question for you so that you have a chance to talk too.
Yeah, okay.
Do you think there's certain points in history, and maybe we're in one of those, where these mediums that are set up, TV, movies, comic books, etc., music, do you think that they have a responsibility to address certain topics on one side or the other, similar to when comic books, and I might be wrong, there is a big kind of movement where every superhero fighting Adolf Hitler. And Now, was that an example of kind of one of those shifts that you're not liking? Or do you think that was them using that media in response
it's
to
funny
a situation?
That you bring that up, because that's one of the big debates right now, is that Marvel's big summer story is this story called Secret Empire. And spoiler alert here, but I think it's been fairly well publicized, but Captain America has been revealed as a Hydra agent from the very beginning. So, like, he's been interweaving himself into the superhero community as a Hydra agent. And, you know, the Hydra they were Nazi collaborators. They worked with the Nazis back in World War II when, you know, Captain America's on the cover of his first issue ever, punching Hitler. Mm-hmm. You know, so there's a lot of people that are really upset about how, you know, you've changed this character at its very core, and all of a sudden he's this fascist dictator who's taken over the United States, and he's alienating and making his friends for years and years these criminals, and I think that's hard for people to swallow, because in a lot of ways you're kind of violating and changing who this character is at its core. Because I mean, in the very first issue, he's talking with the Hydra High Council about how you know, we're putting mind control elements in the water supply, and we're going to kill a bunch of people, and it's just like, but he's also conveyed it in such a way and written in such a way that he thinks that in retrospect of everything that he's done in his career as Captain America, he can sleep at night doing this stuff to the American people, and like, I think it's hard for people to see a character that has stood for truth and justice and liberty all of a sudden becoming like this super fascist. Yeah. And a lot of people relate it to where we're at in the United States now with, like, you know, Trump having been elected, and Marvel will say, well, this story would have been released anyways even if Hillary had been elected. But it's just kind of hard because there's that political element, because people get so passionate about, like, the whole Nazi thing, and you're making someone who his entire superhero existence stood up against Nazis and fascism, all of a sudden he's a fascist. And it's for the point of the story. And I guess that's where I can be okay with it, but it's also one of those things where, like, you're co-opting a character when why couldn't you have had, like, Doctor Doom be the big bad in this story?
Well, I mean, I guess, I mean, and I don't get much into the comic book lore. I think sometimes those twists can be interesting. But I guess I'm curious as to, you know, that's an example back in the day where they took something that was, you know, a hot topic of the day, and they kind of ran with it in a way. And similar, I think back in the 40s or something, there was comic books with Superman fighting the KKK.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You know,
Superman versus the KKK was like a radio thing. Yeah. That it was a big deal. I mean, and a lot of people actually say that was one of the reasons why the KKK was eventually defeated, was because these kids were listening to Superman fight the KKK, and they realized, you know what, if Superman's fighting the KKK, that's not somebody that we should join. Yeah.
So, again, do you think, if you were writing a comic book, if you were producing a television series, do you think that it's an obligation to use that medium that you have produced, that it has a following, to work against things that you feel are inadequacies or wrong or things like that? Or do you feel it's that similar bait and switch that you're talking about? And I know they're different. I'm not saying that they're the same, but you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying, but I think to a certain degree, like, if you care about that character enough to where you're working with them, I think it's important to work within the character as he's been established in such a way where, like, why couldn't Hydra have had infiltrated these different superhero groups in a way that didn't involve Captain America being this great traitor? And, you know, why isn't Captain America leading the charge against the fascists? Because, I mean, those of us who love the character of Captain America, he would be standing up to the fascists. He wouldn't be the fascist himself.
Or is he a triple agent? Is the twist going to be that he's actually...
Yeah. Well, maybe. And the thing is, like, this isn't going to last. I mean, Captain America is going to be Captain America by the time Avengers Infinity War comes out. I mean, you're not going to have Captain Fascism in the comic books next time an Avengers movie comes out. It's just not going to happen. But I think you can tell stories that utilize characters like that in a really powerful way, and like the Superman example, that was utilized to kind of finally defeat the KKK, and I think they're actually going to make a movie about that, a documentary or something. But I think the X-Men is a great example of that. Is where Chris Claremont, the X-Men. I mean, you go back to, when they were first introduced, you had 5 white kids, where you had Angel, Beast, Iceman, Cyclops, and Jean Grey. But that really wasn't, X-Men wasn't very popular when it was just those 5 characters. It wasn't until Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum and John Byrne got involved where they introduced the all new X-Men with like Wolverine, Thunderbird, who was a Native American, Storm, who's a African princess, Nightcrawler, who was this German guy that looked like a demon, Colossus, who was a communist Russian guy, and like that true diversity. But X-Men has always had kind of that underlying minority outsider aspect to it, where it's been they've been fighting against prejudice and persecution and in a lot of ways racism. So X-Men from its very early beginnings has been like kind of a comic book that's been a rallying cry for like the civil rights movement. And now there's a lot of LGBTQIA people that really embrace the X-Men as like an allegory for their struggles in their own life. And the X-Men has always been that. So like, I don't have a problem with that. And I'm a huge X-Men fan. And I have been since I was a little kid. And maybe that's why they were so big in like the 80s and 90s, was because you had like those outsiders that were reading comic books, and it wasn't cool, and it was out of the mainstream. And X-Men was like, that's when it was at the height of its popularity, was the 90s. X-Men was just like flying off the shelves, and I think there's a certain element of politics that's just assumed in that title that you don't have with other characters. And Captain America, he's literally draped in the flag. So there's a certain degree of politics, and there has been a lot of political stories that have been told throughout the years with Captain America that are classic storylines, but never one I think like that is this kind of hard to swallow.
I know there's a little off topic, but not really. I don't do a lot of comic books. I don't. I'm not really invested in reading a lot of them. But the X-Men movies I watched, and I always thought it was a very interesting choice. I liked it, but I always thought it was an interesting choice. And now that you talk about so much inclusion, I think to myself, you know what? They were nice enough to give Kelsey Grammer a shot at the Beast, and I liked him.
Yeah, he was great.
But would that have been even close to your first thought of casting?
Yes.
Really?
You look back at like the casting calls and stuff that like Wizard Magazine used to do. They used to have a column monthly that was casting call, and they would cast different comic book movies. And the really interesting thing about the X-Men casting was, if you look back at those, Patrick Stewart was always the one that everybody said has to be Professor X, and Kelsey Grammer was the one that was always, he has to be the Beast. Has to
really?
Be Hank McCoy.
Like he went.
Yeah, yes.
I don't know why, because he is like the furthest thing from that. Like from what. And again, I haven't read a lot of comic books, so I just know the imagery that I've seen, like almost like cover book art of the Beast. And I would never say, Kelsey Grammer, that's the one.
But I think if you read the comic books, you'd hear Kelsey Grammer's voice when you read The Beast.
See, so that's really interesting. It's like, from an outsider who doesn't know and looks at it, like that was like a weird choice for me. But you're like, oh yeah, that was. Oh
right. Yeah,
and I
that was like a slam dunk. That was
worked.
A home run casting, and I could, I've actually said this when I've been talking to people about this. If Fox, they are making a X-Men TV show. It's going to be called, I think, The Gifted. It's going to come out this next fall. I would have no problem with them saying, Kelsey Grammer, you're going to be like the X-Men in residence that's going to be like the mentor for these young mutants. I think that would be phenomenal. Yeah.
Sure. See, I don't know anything about the casting at all. I'm just like, Kelsey Grammer, that's a weird choice. But and I guess that's the thing too, like, as an outsider, I think that we can sometimes be critical of the choices like for casting and stuff like that. But you don't necessarily know all the details of the background story or the lore. And it might be similar now when I'm looking at like the Captain Fascist kind of thing, thing. I'm like, I don't know. Whatever,
exactly.
Because I don't know. I don't have the
to
background.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't have that that background knowledge to have that investment of it's almost kind of like a loss by losing that character in the way that you thought he was or you looked up to.
And I think
I can kind of see that.
And see, like, I'm the type of person, let's see how this plays out. It doesn't really necessarily make sense to me right now, but let's see how it plays out. I'm not going to get super angry, but geez, I mean, you go online right now, and we've talked about internet rage, and right now the internet rage with this storyline is just off the charts, and it's from both sides of the political spectrum. People just don't know how to respond to this, and but you look at it, and I think there's some characters that it would have made more sense to have them do that, but I mean, like the Punisher. I mean, he's like he would be like the perfect fascist character. Now, whether or not he could convince people to follow him, I think that's up in the air. But it's just one of those things where you just get back to. I mean, is entertainment for escapism, or is it to have the entertainment align with your political views? And I think in some ways you watch things like I think the Daily Show and the Colbert Report are a great example of. You watch those because either they're funny or they align with your political views, or both. Mm-hmm. But you go in knowing that, and I think if you're going in and you're looking for some escapism, you don't want to get hit over the head with something where you're being. One thing that was very apparent the last couple of years was the Red Skull, who's Captain America's like arch enemy. It was almost like they were taking bits and pieces from Donald Trump's speeches. Mm-hmm. And putting them in the mouth of the Red Skull. So it's like, okay, anybody that like agrees with Trump is a Nazi, person who advocates like death camps for, and that's just hard for me to swallow. Like where, I'm not necessarily the biggest Trump fan, but maybe there's some people out there that are good people that think that he's got some good ideas and. You're putting those people in the same camp as the Red Skull.
Yeah, I think when we get into the discussion of politics, I think I get very jaded about the kind of partisan system that we have, and how you could be part of party A and B, let's say, and you believe A.1 is really important and B.1 is the opposition. And so you attack each other, and you don't care about A points 2, 3, 4, 5 through 100.
Yeah,
you just get caught up on one issue. And when entertainment, for instance, my girlfriend's mom and my girlfriend watch this similar show, and it's Scandal, and Cyrus Bean is my favorite character. He is incredible. I love him. Love Cyrus Bean. And in the show, he. Plays he's on the Republican ticket with this president, and later on the show, spoiler alert, he kind of aligns himself with this Democratic candidate.
Yep.
And my girlfriend's mom stopped liking his character because he switched party sides. And I look at this and I'm like, it's a TV show.
Yeah.
And that show is political going into it.
Yeah.
And also, I don't think it's out of the realm that politicians align themselves with what's convenient at the time. A lot of the things that any politician says, and you can put Trump or the Bush or Clintons or whatever, you can put anybody in those situations. I'm sure they have said things in one moment that was more convenient to them that they maybe didn't 100% believe in.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it just kind of aligned with the moment. That happens. Ultimately, John, it's all entertainment. You can love it, you can hate it. and you don't have to listen to it. You don't have to watch it. You can move on to the next thing, or you can make something better. I mean, I think people are creative enough that there's never going to be a lack of something. It is a little disheartening, though, when something you've grown to love maybe shifts, or it's similar to a show ending.
Yeah.
When they change it so substantially, it feels like a loss.
And the thing is I love politics and I love talking politics. It's when you're unable to express your point of view because of virtue signaling by like a character or something like that, or a writer for a series or something like that, that you're being vilified because of your viewpoint, when, you know what, most of the time you have a reasonable, rational reason for thinking the way you do. And I think when we get into this ham-fisted dialogue where you get into virtue signaling and things like that, you're not being open-minded and you're not having a conversation like we're having right now. And
you know, John, maybe you'd enjoy life more if you weren't so wrong all the time. I can't even believe you.
That's the truth. I just need to admit that everyone else knows better.
Just admit it. You know, here's the thing. Again, I think that we've had some good conversation, and I don't think that we 100% agree on everything that we say.
Absolutely not. Yeah,
but we can always come back
and hug it out.
And hug it out. It's like those new commercials. I think it's some scented soap, and he's like, I just hug it out because I want to embrace and just live life and be happy.
Yep.
Kumbaya.
And that's a political endorsement that we can all support. Just hug it out.
Hug it out. Ladies and gentlemen, hug it out there. We'll see you next time on Pop Culture Problem.